Have you ever been hurt by someone only to watch them carry on like nothing ever happened? Like your pain didn't even register? That sting, that silence, it hits differently. It's not just the words they never said. It's the way they look at you like everything's fine. It's the way they laugh, smile, and keep moving forward as if your world wasn't shaken by what they did. And you're left with a question that burns in your chest. How can someone cause so much damage and act like it meant nothing? You replay the moment over and over, trying to make sense of it. You wonder if maybe you imagined it. Maybe it wasn't that bad. Maybe you're being dramatic. But deep down, you know the truth. It happened. And it hurt. Yet somehow, their silence makes you question everything. That's the most brutal part. When someone's lack of response to your pain makes you doubt your own experience. You start to shrink, not because you're weak, but because someone refused to see you, refused to acknowledge you. That kind of emotional dismissal can be more damaging than the event itself. You deserve to be heard. You deserve to be acknowledged. You deserve healing. But healing can't begin when you're stuck in the shadow of someone else's denial. When someone hurts you and acts like nothing happened, it's not just painful, it's confusing. It's like screaming in a room full of people who are all pretending they can't hear you. And that silence, that's a loud message. It says, your feelings don't matter here, but I need you to understand something. It's not the truth. It's their truth, not yours. Their inability to face your pain is not your weakness. It's their own fear, their own emotional limitation. This is where your power begins to rise. Not from their apology, but from your clarity. The moment you stop expecting them to validate what they broke, you start taking your strength back. You're not broken because they ignored what they did. You're not weak for still feeling it. You're human. And humans are wired to need connection, understanding, and resolution. That need is not your flaw. It's your strength. It means you care deeply. It means you feel deeply. And that's something to protect, not hide. Stay with this message because you're going to discover something deeper than an apology. You're going to understand why people hurt others and pretend it never happened. And when you do, you'll no longer chase closure. You'll create it. You'll learn how to stop bleeding for people who wouldn't even hand you a bandage. This isn't just about healing. It's about transformation. It's about rising above what was never given and stepping into what you've always deserved. Don't turn away now. You're about to uncover the truth they'll never tell you, but the one that will finally set you free. You don't just carry the memory of what happened. You carry the weight of what was never said. The apology that never came, the explanation you begged for in silence, the understanding you craved but never received. It sits inside you like a stone, heavy and cold, making you question whether your pain even matters. That's what happens when someone hurts you and acts like nothing happened. They force you to grieve in isolation, to heal from a wound that no one else will admit exists. And that loneliness, that emotional isolation, it does something to your spirit. It dims your light. It makes you quieter, smaller, more unsure of yourself. But what if that weight you're carrying isn't yours to hold? What if the silence isn't proof that your feelings are invalid, but proof that they were never capable of understanding you in the first place? You see, people who ignore the harm they cause aren't strong. They're emotionally weak. They lack the courage to confront themselves, to face the truth that their actions had consequences. So they pretend. They bury it. They act normal. Because facing the damage they cause would mean acknowledging the kind of person they really are. And most people aren't ready for that level of truth. You need to understand that their silence isn't a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of their emotional limits. You're not invisible. You're not unimportant. You're not overreacting. You are someone who felt deeply, who trusted, who gave, and who got hurt. And that matters. You don't need their acknowledgement to begin healing. You don't need their words to validate your experience. The fact that you're still standing, still breathing, still trying to make sense of it all, that's your power. That's your truth. And no one can take that from you. They can act like nothing happened, but that doesn't erase what you know in your heart. It doesn't change what you felt. It doesn't undo what they did. But what it does do is reveal something powerful. It reveals that they were never capable of offering you the emotional presence you deserved. That realization is painful, but it's also freeing. Because once you stop hoping for someone to show up in a way they never could, you start making space for your own strength to rise. You start moving differently, thinking differently, loving yourself in ways you didn't know you could. Let them pretend. Let them carry on. Let them build a story that leaves your pain out of the picture. You don't need to be in their version of events. You're writing a different story now, one where your healing is not dependent on their remorse, one where your power is not held hostage by their silence. You're choosing yourself. You're choosing peace over confusion, clarity over chaos. And as you step into that truth, the weight starts to lift, because it was never yours to carry in the first place. When someone refuses to acknowledge the hurt they cause, it's not because it didn't happen. It's because admitting it would force them to confront a truth they're too fragile to face. People avoid responsibility not because they're unaware, but because they lack the emotional depth to sit with their own discomfort. They act like nothing happened, not to spare you, but to spare themselves. Denial is their shield. Indifference is their escape. And while you're left dealing with the emotional wreckage, they continue on as if the damage never existed. That isn't strength. That's emotional cowardice wrapped in silence. Understanding this truth is not about excusing their behavior. It's about freeing yourself from the false belief that their silence means your pain wasn't real. It was real. It mattered. You lived it, you felt it, and you survived it. But now you have to stop waiting for them to evolve into the person who will make it right. They won't. People who hurt you and pretend nothing happened often live in denial because it's easier than growth. They cling to the illusion of being a good person, and admitting the truth would shatter that image. So they bury your pain not because you're unimportant, but because they're unequipped to deal with the truth of who they are. You deserve more than that. You deserve connection built on honesty, accountability, and care. Not silence, not gaslighting, not a fake version of peace where your pain is ignored. The real peace you seek will never come from them. It will come when you stop expecting them to offer something they've never learned how to give. Their actions have shown you their capacity. Now it's time to accept it. Not out of bitterness, but out of self-preservation, out of clarity, out of love for yourself. Emotional maturity isn't about always being right. It's about being willing to face the impact of your behavior even when it's uncomfortable. The people who hurt you and acted like nothing happened chose to avoid that growth. And in doing so, they revealed their ceiling. You've been living under that ceiling for far too long, shrinking your feelings to keep the peace, questioning your worth to hold on to a connection that was never truly whole. But your healing begins the moment you recognize their silence is not a mystery to solve, it's a mirror, and what it reflects is not your failure but their limitation. Let that truth anchor you. Let it sharpen your awareness and soften your heart toward yourself. You didn't deserve the pain, you didn't deserve the silence. But you do deserve to stop carrying the emotional weight of people who chose avoidance over accountability. This is your moment to break free, not by demanding closure from them, but by choosing closure within yourself. No more shrinking, no more questioning, no more waiting for someone to validate the truth you've always known. You are not invisible. You are not forgotten. You are rising, and you are doing it on your own terms. The people who pretend nothing happened after hurting you are not confused. They're protecting their own image. They want to remain the hero in their story, even if that means making you the villain in yours. When they silence your pain, they're not seeking peace. They're seeking control. If they can rewrite the story, minimize your emotions, and deny the truth, they get to stay comfortable. But your growth begins when you stop letting their comfort be more important than your truth. Your emotions are not up for debate. What happened to you is not something that can be erased just because someone else refuses to face it. Your healing does not need their permission. You do not have to wait for an apology to begin rising. The silence they gave you is not your prison, it's your awakening. Because when someone can look you in the eyes after breaking you and still act like everything's fine, that is not love. That is not respect. That is emotional avoidance masked as indifference. And no one with a healed heart can stay silent in the presence of pain they caused. People who are whole acknowledge. They reflect. They repair. But people who are emotionally fragmented will deflect, deny, and disappear. You're not too much. You're not too emotional. You're not too sensitive. You are a human being with a heart that feels and a soul that remembers. And that's not something to hide. That's your power. Feeling deeply is not weakness. It's a form of wisdom. It means you don't walk through life numb. It means you care, you connect, you carry meaning in your moments. That is strength, even when others try to make you feel small for having it. Especially when they run from the depth you bring. You cannot heal in places where your truth is denied. You cannot grow in connections where your voice is silenced. You were not made to live in emotional shadows just to keep others from facing their own. Your voice matters. Your pain matters. Your experience matters, even if they never admit it, even if they act like nothing ever happened, because you know what happened. And now you're learning to honor that truth, not bury it to protect someone else's comfort. Let them run from it. Let them pretend. Let them build a world where your pain doesn't exist. You don't belong in that world. You belong in a space where truth is welcome, where healing is sacred, and where silence is never used as a weapon. You belong in your own light. And that light grows every time you choose truth over denial, peace over pretending, self-worth over silence. Don't beg for clarity. Don't chase recognition. Don't shrink for someone else's inability to feel. The truth is already in you, and that truth is enough to set you free. Keep rising. Keep healing. Keep choosing yourself, no matter how loudly they act like they did nothing wrong. There comes a moment when you must stop trying to make sense of someone else's silence and start making peace with your own voice. You've spent enough time wondering why they did it, why they never said anything, why they acted like it never mattered. But the truth is, their refusal to acknowledge your pain says more about their limits than it does about your worth. They couldn't face your pain because they couldn't face themselves. It was never about you not deserving an apology. It was about them not having the strength to offer one. And holding your breath, waiting for them to become someone they're not, is only keeping you trapped in a version of yourself you've already outgrown. You are not defined by their avoidance. You are not shaped by their indifference. You are built from every choice you make in the aftermath. Every time you rise instead of crumble. Every time you choose peace over revenge. Every time you choose growth over guilt. That is who you are now. Not someone begging for understanding, but someone creating their own closure. Someone powerful enough to move forward without the apology they deserved. That is real strength. Not the silence they gave you, but the voice you are reclaiming. The people who hurt you and then act like nothing happened are often disconnected from their own truth. They cannot process your pain because they have never processed their own. They fear vulnerability, they fear accountability, they fear discomfort, so they bury it. They pretend, and they move on. But you are not here to carry what they refuse to face. You are not here to be the emotional container for someone else's immaturity. You are here to heal, to rise, and to rebuild your life in a way that reflects your truth, not their denial. You don't need their apology to validate what you felt. You lived through it. You cried for it. You bled emotionally for it. That experience, as painful as it was, became a turning point. Not because they finally saw your pain, but because you finally saw your worth. You no longer have to chase clarity from someone who benefits from your confusion. You no longer have to shrink yourself just to keep a false peace intact. You are allowed to step away from what hurts, even if it never said goodbye. Let them act like nothing happened. Let them rewrite the past to suit their comfort. You don't need to be a character in their version of the story. You are writing your own, and this time, the narrative is not built on silence, but on self-respect. This is your invitation to stop hoping they'll return with truth and start trusting that everything you need is already within you. You were never meant to wait for healing from the same hands that caused the wound. You were meant to rise, to release, and to reclaim your life, one choice, one breath, one truth at a time. There is nothing more liberating than realizing you don't need anyone else to validate your pain for it to be real. You've been waiting for someone to say, yes, I did that. Yes, I hurt you. But that waiting has kept your heart in chains, locked to a door that will never open. The acknowledgement you seek cannot come from someone who lacks the emotional maturity to admit they were wrong. And if you continue to hand your peace over to people like that, you'll keep living in cycles of silence, confusion, and self-doubt. But when you shift your focus inward, when you stop needing them to admit it, something changes. You start standing in your truth, not begging for it to be seen. They pretend nothing happened because facing it would mean facing the gap between who they think they are and who they've shown themselves to be. That gap terrifies them. So they cover it with false normalcy, shallow words, and empty gestures. But you've outgrown that space. You no longer need someone who wounded you to also be the one who heals you. Because that healing is yours. It belongs to you. It starts when you accept that you were hurt, that it wasn't okay, and that you are allowed to rise from it without permission or apology. This kind of healing isn't loud. It doesn't always look like a dramatic breakthrough. Sometimes it looks like setting boundaries you never thought you could. Sometimes it sounds like silence. Not the silence they used to avoid you, but the silence you choose to protect your peace. Sometimes it feels like finally exhaling after holding your breath for too long. And sometimes it means looking at the people who never owned their actions and no longer needing anything from them. No more closure, no more clarity, just distance, just freedom. You didn't deserve the pain. You didn't deserve the silence. But you do deserve to stop making yourself smaller to fit into someone else's comfort zone. You do deserve to live in truth, even when others choose denial. You do deserve to stop carrying the emotional debris they left behind, because what they won't admit, you can still release. What they pretend didn't happen, you can still grow from. Their silence has no power unless you give it meaning. So take your power back, take your peace back, take your story back. You're not broken, you're rebuilding, you're not bitter, you're becoming. Every time you choose to validate your own experience, you reclaim a part of yourself that was lost in their silence. And as you gather those pieces, you're creating something stronger, wiser, more whole. You are not here to chase understanding from people committed to pretending. You are here to become the version of you that no longer seeks their recognition. You are here to rise with clarity, to lead with self-respect, and to heal with dignity. And you are doing exactly that. Healing begins the moment you stop asking why and start accepting what is. Not because the pain is fair, but because your peace is sacred. You can spend years inside the loop of confusion, replaying what they did, analyzing their silence, hoping one day they'll wake up and finally understand. But that waiting turns into a trap. It feeds the illusion that your worth is still tied to their recognition. It's not. Your value doesn't shrink just because someone refuses to honor it. Their silence isn't evidence that you're unimportant. It's proof that they're unwilling to face themselves. Some people are so deeply disconnected from their own emotions that acknowledging yours feels impossible. They've spent their lives avoiding discomfort, deflecting blame, and controlling narratives. And when someone like that hurts you, their first instinct is not to repair. It's to erase. They erase the moment, the memory, the meaning. Not because they forgot, but because remembering would demand growth. And growth is painful. Growth takes humility. Growth takes strength. But they chose avoidance. They chose silence. And in doing so, they revealed the truth. They were never capable of meeting you where your soul needed to be seen. But you can't keep holding yourself hostage to someone else's emotional limitations. You've spent enough time blaming yourself, wondering if you were too much, too sensitive, too emotional. You weren't. You were honest. You were open. You were real. And that frightens someone who has lived their life behind walls. You didn't lose them. They lost access to someone who was willing to show up with a full heart. And that's not your burden to carry. Let go of the need to be understood by someone who chooses denial over honesty. Let go of the hope that one day they'll wake up and see the damage they caused. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. But your healing doesn't depend on that outcome. Your healing lives in your decision to close the chapter, even without a final sentence. You get to choose peace without their permission. You get to move forward without their apology. Because the moment you decide to no longer let their silence dictate your worth, you begin to reclaim your life. This is where your strength is born, not from what they did, but from what you do now. You get to rewrite the meaning of this pain. You get to grow from the ache, to evolve from the silence, to transform the wound into wisdom. You didn't ask for this pain, but you can choose what it makes of you. Let it make you stronger. Let it make you clearer. Let it remind you of what you deserve and what you'll never accept again. You are not here to be silenced, erased, or dismissed. You are here to be seen, to be heard, to be whole. And that journey begins with the power of your own acceptance. You are enough, even if they never say a word. You don't need to keep waiting for someone to return with the words you wish they'd say. You've waited long enough. Waited for them to grow. Waited for them to care. Waited for a moment that would finally make all the pain make sense. But the longer you wait, the more you put your healing in the hands of someone who already proved they couldn't handle your heart. You owe it to yourself to stop standing in the doorway of someone else's emotional avoidance. You deserve to walk through your own. Into peace, into freedom, into clarity. Holding on to the hope of repair from someone who refuses to even acknowledge the damage is like trying to build a home on shattered glass. Every step cuts deeper. Every breath reminds you of what's missing. And still you try to hold it together. Because somewhere inside, you believed it could be different. You thought if they just saw your pain, if they just heard your voice, they'd care enough to fix it. But the truth is, not everyone wants to fix what they break. Some people fear the truth more than they value the connection. Some would rather lose you than face themselves. That is not your failure. That is your clarity. That is your freedom disguised as loss. Because now you see it for what it is. You see that their silence isn't silence. It's avoidance. Their indifference isn't strength. It's fear. And the longer you carry their emotional burden, the longer you silence your own voice. But not anymore, because now you understand that healing isn't waiting for them to come back changed. Healing is deciding you won't stay the same. You deserve to choose yourself, without guilt, without explanation. To say, this hurt me, even if they never admit it. To walk away, not in bitterness, but in self-respect. You deserve peace that isn't earned through someone else's growth, but through your own awakening. An awakening means facing the truth, even when it's painful. The truth that they won't show up, The truth that the apology may never come. The truth that some people protect their image more than your heart. And still, you rise. You rise because your soul was never meant to stay broken. You rise because your worth is not dependent on someone else's ability to see it. You rise because your healing has nothing to do with who hurt you, and everything to do with who you are becoming. This is your path now. A path of self-trust, of courage, of unshakable truth. Let them live in denial, you will live in freedom. Let them pretend, you will speak your truth. Let them forget, you will remember who you are. Not because they came back and made it right, but because you decided not to let it destroy you. And that decision is everything. That's the beginning of your power. That's where you finally begin to feel free. Freedom doesn't come when they finally admit they were wrong. Freedom comes when you stop needing their admission to feel whole. You are not here to convince anyone of your pain. You are here to recognize it, honor it, and rise above it. The moment you stop chasing closure from someone who caused chaos, you begin to reclaim your power. And that power is not loud. It's quiet, steady, unshakable. It's the power of knowing who you are, even when someone else tries to erase you with silence. There is something profoundly empowering about not needing anything from the person who hurt you, not their words, not their guilt, not their presence, just distance, just peace, just clarity. It means you've finally detached your healing from their control. It means you've grown beyond the emotional games, the unanswered questions, the subtle manipulations disguised as indifference. It means your self-worth is no longer negotiable. You no longer sit at the table of someone who starved you of emotional truth and call it love. Letting go doesn't mean it didn't matter. It means you matter too much to stay stuck. It means you're no longer willing to invest your energy in someone who made comfort a higher priority than compassion, someone who watched you break and turned their head the other way, someone who chose silence where there should have been softness, avoidance where there should have been accountability. And now you've outgrown that space. Because pretending nothing happened doesn't erase what you felt. It only shows you the depth of their emotional absence. You deserve presence. You deserve care that doesn't disappear in discomfort. You deserve relationships where truth isn't punished, where vulnerability isn't met with silence, where hurt is not ignored. And the moment you decide that, your entire life begins to shift. You begin to attract better. You begin to protect more. You begin to love yourself in ways that silence never taught you, because you're no longer hoping they'll see the damage. They showed you who they were when they ignored it. You were never too much. You were never too emotional. You were never asking for too much. You were simply asking the wrong person. And now you're done asking. You're choosing to move forward, choosing to heal, choosing to stop making room for people who refuse to make space for your truth. That is growth. That is strength. That is transformation. Every time you take a step forward without needing them to come with you, you reclaim a piece of yourself. Every time you stop looking back for answers from someone who only offered silence, you build a new level of peace. This is what rising looks like. Quiet, powerful, unapologetic. Not because they finally came around, but because you finally stopped waiting. And that's where your healing becomes real. That's where your strength becomes visible. That's where your life begins again, on your terms, in your voice, without permission. The most powerful shift happens when you no longer explain your worth to those who are committed to misunderstanding it. You stop defending your heart, your boundaries, your silence, your growth. You stop giving access to your energy like it's free, because it isn't. It's sacred. It's earned. And anyone who treated it as disposable has already shown you they weren't ready to receive it. You're not here to beg for recognition. You're here to walk in truth, even if no one claps, even if no one follows. Because real power doesn't need applause. It needs alignment. There is peace in being misunderstood when you understand yourself. You stop shrinking to make others comfortable. You stop over-explaining your pain to people who never listened in the first place. You realize their silence wasn't confusion, it was clarity. Their avoidance wasn't hesitation, it was choice. And once you accept that, you stop negotiating your needs with people who never intended to meet them. You start pouring into yourself what you were once starving for from them. That shift is not easy, but it is everything. You were never asking for too much. You were asking for what you were willing to give. The problem was never your standards. The problem was accepting less just to keep someone close. But that version of you is fading. The one who overfunctioned to hold a connection together. The one who stayed quiet to keep the peace. The one who tolerated disrespect disguised as indifference. That version of you is gone. And what's rising in its place is a version that knows peace is not found in others. It is found in protecting yourself from anything that disrupts your emotional clarity. Healing doesn't mean you forget. It means you remember without reopening the wound. You see the past for what it was without letting it dictate your worth. You accept that closure isn't something they give, it's something you claim. You look at their silence and realize it speaks volumes. Not about you, but about their emotional capacity. And you no longer make excuses for someone else's inability to meet you where you were, because you've elevated now. You've learned that love is not proven by endurance. It's proven by consistency, presence, and effort. And if it costs your peace, it's too expensive. Every time you choose yourself, you rewrite the narrative they tried to script for you. Every time you walk away without bitterness, you reclaim your softness and your strength. Every time you let go without needing revenge, you rise in ways they'll never understand. You are no longer trying to be understood by people who lack the depth to see you. You're no longer chasing conversations that were never meant to heal. You're done begging for closure from people who closed the door long before you stopped knocking. Now, you build doors of your own, ones that open inward, ones that lead to peace, to self-respect, to unshakable wholeness. This is where your power lives, right here, in your silence, in your standards, in your rise. You stop waiting for validation when you finally realize that your worth is not a debate. It is not measured by how much someone approves of you, nor is it defined by how many people stay. Worth is intrinsic. It exists in your breath, in your soul, in the choices you make when no one is watching. The more you ground yourself in that truth, the less you tolerate anything that feels like emotional begging. You don't chase love anymore, because real love never needs to be hunted. It meets you, holds you, and grows with you. If it demands your silence, your discomfort, or your self-abandonment, it's not love. It's control wrapped in manipulation. Letting go isn't weakness, it's clarity. It's the conscious decision to no longer entertain confusion. You stop rereading conversations looking for signs. You stop rehearsing the last thing you should have said. You understand that closure isn't a sentence, it's a boundary. It's the moment you no longer need answers from the person who created the question. Your peace is no longer up for debate. You don't tolerate people who speak in circles, who disappear when accountability knocks, who pretend ignorance when called out. Because now you speak a new language, one of self-trust, one of internal alignment, one of knowing that what you accept